We're all trying to get better at what we do. Writing is it's one of those interesting crafts where you really have to make some specific tweaks where people are being poignant about the changes you can make so that your writing gets better. We all hear things like, oh, you need to show, not tell, but how can you actually transfer that into some practical technique that makes your writing better? Today on Punk Write, we're going to take a look at the technique of using strong verbs and clear nouns to be able to improve the clarity of your writing. Stick around and we'll take a look at some tangible examples so that you can get better. Don't go anywhere. Almost unwillingly, I stepped towards her. She gave a small sigh, like a sleepy child, and drooped gratefully into the circle of my arms. Her tears bled through my tunic. I held the curves of her waist, felt the warm, soft skin of her arms. That's a beautiful image. This is from Madeline Miller's Song of Achilles, beautiful book. But I really like the writing because the image is so clear in how she describes things. One of the things that I find a bit fastidious about some writers is this incessant need to describe and describe and describe. And it's often overlooked the power of the verb as a descriptive tool. Actions are describing specific situations. It's the description of things doing something. Good writing and strong writing, and if you're interested in making it better in your own technique, is simply identifying how verbs can move your action along. Verbs, I think, are often overlooked as a descriptive tool because people just don't know enough verbs. It's very easy to use certain structures that are comfortable and easy, like the verb to be, which is, I think, often overused in the wrong situations because it's easy, it's known, and it's mostly how we speak. But when you think about your writing, and you want to create situations, and you want to create actions, the use of strong verbs is going to be much more effective in describing what is going on in your scenes. There are a couple of salient points that I'd like to talk about today, and I will look at some examples. But one of the most problematic areas, particularly for new writers, how do you actually show what's going on without telling too much information? If you're able to identify a couple of different structures within your own writing, I think you'll find that you're going to be much more powerful and much clearer in how you create imagery in your writing. I've noticed this in myself as I go through my second novel, The Banknotes, and I'm really doing some very key editing, which is fun because you are able to really see this thing come to life because you're focusing on the verbs themselves. Using strong verbs is going to help clarify your story. In fact, let's take a look at a couple of examples right now. Before we get into it, I want to take a quick look at an excerpt from Chuck Palnick. This is from his book, Beautiful You. He's most known for Fight Club, probably, but I really like his writing. I like his style, I like the fluidity, and I do like the way that he uses verbs to move his ideas along. Now, I want to show you just in this excerpt where all of the verbs are, and you can take a look at a couple of places where you have very active verbs, and you have a few passive verbs or state of being verbs. You know, there's one, seemed, passed, and looked. Now, the percentages, you know, if I were to look, maybe 30%, a little less of the writing for this. And I think that is not a bad percentage. You need to use some more passive verbs or state of being verbs. Those are very important. But if you want to keep them in the lower end, I think you're going to be better and more effective at using the verbs for descriptive purposes and moving the ideas along. One of the ideas that is central to improving your writing is keeping a focus of the verb as the main element of the sentence. I'm going to show you a couple of examples here, a couple of options, and see how this can have a different feel or a different effect by where you put or the type of verb that you use. In the first option, this is very much a state of being verb. There were. It's a very passive sense, and again, this is not bad. It's just a different way of expressing it, and you may want to be passive depending on what you're trying to write, but this is a form that will give you that for sure. And in the second option, you know, the verb here is used as the participle, was interrupted, and it's also a way to create some distance between the reader and the writer. Again, not bad, just a different style. What I'm promoting, though, is that you really focus on the verb as a central idea to the sentence. So here we see, concerns of great magnitude, that is the main idea, the subject, interrupted the mayor's sleep. That is a very strong, clear idea, and I believe very descriptive. This is a very strong connection to the subject, and it gives you a very strong sense of voice that I would promote. So that's one way that you can actually be directed in terms of creating some different writing and writing style, because you'll find also that as you increase your use of verbs and specify your verbs, your style is going to improve and change likewise. One of the things that's a little bit of a pet peeve to me that I think that I've become more conscious of in my own writing is the use of the verb to be. The use of the verb to be is often used as a compound verb, or it's used in conjunction of something else. And I'm trying to step back from that and use the verb to be only when you are specifically describing something. And I think you can extend this idea to all kinds of other passive verbs, and you'll find that you're going to reduce passive voice in your writing and create more active scenes. Verbs like to be, to seem, to have, those things are important and necessary. And I'm not saying don't use them. You have to use them in certain situations, but use them only when they're necessary. If there is a more descriptive element that you can apply because you have a better verb, definitely prefer the verb. Let's take a look at a couple of examples here. It's important to understand the situation and what you want to say and how you desire the effect that you want to produce as the author. This is very important. Again, I want to be very clear. There's nothing wrong with writing different passive ways or using passive voice at times, but it's just depending on what you want as an author. So here's an example where I have written this using state of being verbs, and it's very passive until the end, and feel the effect. Yesterday's events were an anomaly. He would act upon them quickly, decisively. In this, he was unequivocal. Still, he stirred anxiously in his bed. And I put that at the end because that active verb really gives some kick to the end of that idea. The last example that I want to take a look at is the use of the gerund. Now, the gerund is technically not the verb. It can be used in verb situations such as the present continuous tense, like he was walking, but using that form of the gerund as an adjective or as a descriptor is a very effective way to create a sense of movement and a powerful sense of action without actually using the verb. And I think it's best if I just show you. Let's take a look at a couple of examples right here. There are lots of ways to use verbs, and one that is very much my style, but I see in a lot of authors as well, is using the gerund for specific purposes. Adding an ing to the verb gives some flexibility about how you can use these verbs for descriptive purposes, and usually I tend to add them as adjective or beginning adjective phrases. For example, perhaps this mass of protesters will come to their senses and return to their normal, quiet little lives, suffering in the confines of their apartments, making their vapid plans for the future, and then settling in front of their televisions to let time pass. So suffering, settling, those are both gerunds that are used, and making, also create some descriptive purposes and some adjunct types of descriptors to the idea itself. Thanks for joining us here on Punk Write today. I hope you were able to extract a few ideas that's going to help with your writing and make you a better writer. Remember, writing with verbs is going to make your writing come alive, be more specific, be more descriptive, and be more directed with where you want to go with your scenes and your stories. Good writing is about nouns and verbs. Focus on that and you're going to improve your technique. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, please do so, or leave a comment below so we can begin a dialogue. Until then, we just keep on writing. Punk Write.